Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to first begin by thanking the organisers for such a marvellous online conference and for all of you for being here. It is a privilege to speak before such a distinguished audience. The title of my talk is Creating the Next Generation of Computer Literate Billionaires, Part 2, subtitle Pandemic Lockdown, Online Teaching and Learning in Computer Programming for the Next Generation. This is Part 2. Part 1 was given in Pycon, Sweden last year, and I will start with a bit about myself and a bit of background for the talk. A bit about myself. I have a PhD. I am a member of the British Computer Society. I am interested in developing appropriate teaching methods for programming in Python for school children and to encourage them to take it up as a hobby. And I am interested in building up a worthwhile computer science department. Now, we are all aware that computer science is regarded as one of the leading disciplines of the 21st century. Computers are ubiquitous and prevalent in most, if not all, sectors in our global society: medicine, art, sciences, commerce, etc. And the current pandemic has highlighted to all of the world of the critical nature of computers and technology, and they are now regarded as a positive critical force in the infrastructure. Indeed, if the FANGs, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google were a nation, it would be the third richest nation in the world, and it could occupy a seat in the G20. Therefore, coding or computer programming is now regarded by many as an essential skill for any aspiring, ambitious, self-respecting young person in an aspiring nation, and it has been dubbed the fourth R along with reading, writing and arithmetic. In recognition of the new status and huge significance of computer programming, governments worldwide have launched initiatives to have it taught in schools starting from the beginning of the school career in kindergarten through to junior school all the way to secondary school. The areas in red on the map are some of the nations in which this is happening. So the question emerges is, how do we best teach and motivate the next generation in acquiring this all-important skill of computer programming? Now, there have been various writings about the challenges involved in teaching computer programming to school children in this day and age. The Economist has written, "The subject is so young that teachers and curriculum designers have little pedagogical research to guide them. To put this into context, if we look at other subjects such as maths, history, Latin, English, etc., these have been taught for hundreds and thousands of years all over the globe. So there's a great deal of collective experience and knowledge on how best these subjects should be taught and how best people should learn in them. In contrast, computer programming for children has only been around for the past few years, and thus there is little collective experience and knowledge about the teaching and learning of them." So, a couple of years ago, I undertook a venture to introduce computer programming to high school students aged 11 to 18 in the UK. With a dearth of pedagogy and collective experience in the field, I decided to devise and implement my own framework in this area, and also wanting to be more resources to be made available, I made my own YouTube channel, Lil Anonymous, for teaching computer science and computer programming, and you can subscribe to it. And also, there is a book coming out early next year in spring 2021, which is entitled A Step-by-Step Python Guide for Serious Mums or Kids, Dads, Grandpas, Grandmas and Fifth Cousins Once Removed, all the family. A decision was made to introduce computer programming using a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. The bottom-up approach is a tried, tested, successful and traditional method used in computer programming to adults. Foreign languages and mathematics have also been taught in this manner traditionally. In this approach, the concepts and operational definitions of the concepts are taught before they are applied to a program or a problem. Now, this is not the only way of teaching. It is not at all unusual that this approach will be somewhat alien to the modern school student who may have been taught predominantly with a top-down approach, whereby the problem is specified and they then delve further to see what tools are available and to solve the problem. However, my approach was well received. This was then processed with an explanation that was provided that programs are analogous to essays, programming statements analogous to sentences, keywords analogous to words. We would therefore be learning about a keyword at a time and learn about its uses before building up in due course to create more complex programs. The students appeared to like this kind of explanation and buy in to the bottom-up concept. From time to time, I was asked by the students questions such as, "Are you so fluent in the Python language?" Indeed, parents mentioned in Parents' Evening how much their children were enjoying and loving the subject. And the idea was to introduce textual programming or textual computer programming languages such as Python from the very beginning, as opposed to any block-based language such as Scratch. The rationale for that was when you looked at what the students did in other subjects at the young ages of 11, 12 and 13, in English literature, the students studied the plays of William Shakespeare, such as As You Like It and Romeo and Juliet. In maths, the students solved algebraic equations. In geography in the UK not so long ago, 11 and 12-year-olds were writing essays on the advantages and disadvantages of Brexit. So from this we surmise that young people at this stage are comfortable with and are able to manipulate symbols and deal with sophisticated text, and therefore concluded they should be able to cope well with a textual computer programming language such as Python. And we had a good degree of success from this approach, with complimentary comments from students and parents about how much their children were enjoying the subject. And we found that the year 7, that's the 11-year-olds, are better than the year 8, where are the 12-year-olds who seemed better than the 13-year-olds, who seemed to be better than the 14-year-olds, who seemed to be better than the 15-year-olds. So, starting properly from the beginning is better for both students and educators. Introduce these concepts as young as possible. The students were also happy with this teacher-led approach rather than the student-led approach or independent learning only at this beginning stage. And of course, the best students are the ones who are rather motivated to do well in the subject. A congenial home atmosphere is also extremely beneficial, and investment in dedicated computer rooms and equipment in the school, as well as specialist subjects teachers, is also helpful. Then, just as we were getting into a nice rhythm in mid-March of this year, lockdown was announced, and overnight we joined the global online teaching community, and we joined the estimated 900 million children in over 100 countries being educated online at the time. So overnight there was this switch to online education, and again there is no real precedence for this. This meant that we had to reevaluate the framework and a new set of questions emerged. So, these are the lockdown questions arising for online teaching during the pandemic. Question 1. How does this online virtual medium of instruction compare with the established, well-respected, in-person, face-to-face medium of instruction? Question 2. Is it possible to engender a sense of competence, confidence and independence to the students using this medium? Question 3. Is it possible for the students to enjoy the subject via this medium and produce something even more useful? So, with regards to the question on how the online medium of instruction would compare with the well-established and well-respected in-person medium of instruction, after a bit of soul-searching, it was decided that the mindset was really the key here. And there are two ideas which really help shape our thinking in this. The first idea is we should figure out what we really want before we can calculate what we can afford, not the reverse. This is an idea propagated by one Irving Kristol. This means we should figure out what we mean to do and then persevere to work out a means of getting there. The second idea is the medium is the message, an idea propagated by Cambridge alumni Professor McLuhan. So, this means that the online medium of instruction will have its own signature with its own set of strengths and advantages, which remain to be discovered, and it remains for us to exploit and capitalize on them. Question 2. Building confidence, competence and independence with this medium of instruction. Here we would like to empower the student. So it is imperative that students have working programs if they are to feel confident and happy. The priority was given to teaching students to be able to correct their own errors, especially the syntax error, and there was a new emphasis to this in the framework. And the syntax error, which we thought previously was a necessary evil, was introduced in an apologetic fashion, but to our sheer amazement, the young students seemed to embrace this subject of the syntax error. And Nikita, aged 12, wrote, "To me, the most interesting part was the mistakes. When we made them, they could have been minor, but it made such a difference. It was interesting to see how that counted and how intricate a system really is." And Alex, aged 11, said, "I have enjoyed learning how to create a code that generates a random password. I like working on this partly because when I wrote it out, it had a syntax error. This made me experiment, which was very fun. After fixing it, I decided to improve it as well, which made another problem." And Alex, age 11, in the online class, unprompted, wrote a program which randomly selects a card from a deck of cards. Note it has a syntax error. He corrected it sometime that evening of his own volition, and he sent a note at 8:15 a.m. in the morning to say that he had corrected his program and that it works. So much for enthusiasm. And now on to the question, or the third question, on how students can produce something even more useful. This would necessitate students learning about modules or functions quite early on in their programming studies. Now, first of all, I had to change my own ideas about functions, and I previously thought it would be hard for 11, 12 and 13-year-olds to muster, and even harder for children online. But children as young as 5, 6 and 7 are comfortable with the idea of paragraphs in language, and really the idea of processing of blocks is not alien at all, so the topic of functions was introduced. So we started off by showing students a worked example of how simple addition can work by adding two numbers together, with the idea of passing data to the function and telling them how you call the function. The students were asked to type in the worked example, get it running, and then make up their own examples. So here we have examples of functions from Alex, aged 11. We see that he has extended the ideas in the addition function by passing in real numbers, not just integers, and we see he has written a function called multiplication where he is passing in 3 numbers. And this is what Alex said about functions. "I enjoyed learning about functions, i.e. modules, and how to define them so you could access them at any moment." And here we have the functions Deepu, age 12, has created. You see he has created 2 extra functions, division and subtraction. He's also created a function where strings are being passed in. It is interesting to know that we did not have to create the exercises, but they managed to express the creativity in their programs. We decided to push the limits a little bit more and introduce the students to the concepts of using functions for modelling and simulation. For this, we had to introduce the concept of an external file, so it was an added extra level of complexity, and also introduce the level or the concept of graphical representation of data. Could we do this all online? This is a program produced by Siobhan, age 13, which uses external files, and she's put Fibonacci sequences in the file. Now going back to Irving Kristol's mindset, and quote, "We should figure out what we want before we calculate what we can afford, not the reverse. And this way of thinking about issues certainly helped. And on the way, we made both pleasant discoveries of what was possible and also the tools that were available. And this included online editors such as www.repl.it, where you can share both code and screens, and you can take over a screen so you can correct code. We also started to use the chat facilities in different ways in Microsoft Teams for purposes other than chatting but sending code. And in doing all this, we do feel that we are in the first generation of online learning tools, and there is a lot of development in the years to come with the willing participation of students, teachers, and schools. Here is an example of some initiative and enjoyment from a student, Peter, aged 12. "Miss, I can't share my screen, so I posted what I did on Python and it generates 6 random digits to use for an iPhone password." So, if we revisit the original framework, we need to modify it to include syntax and a greater emphasis on modules. Indeed, I will include that in the in-person teaching now. So, conclusion and the way ahead. Some of the strengths of the online medium of instruction, well, we found that online medium promotes good listening, which leads to better understanding. The online medium unleashed a healthy creativity from the children and students, and the online medium promotes structure. It is very unforgiving for lack of structure in lessons and sessions, and the online medium provides ease of access, 24/7 access. In the future, we can import some of the practices of the online medium of instruction into in-person, face-to-face teaching. And there are many exciting developments in online teaching in the next few years with the willing participation of students, educators and schools. This is the first generation of tools. In years to come, the scale of the venture will surely be considered as one of the greatest experiments in online teaching in the history of mankind. Thank you very much. Now, just a reminder, my YouTube channel, Lil Anonymous, a new book in the early spring of 2021, a step-by-step Python guide for serious kids, mums, dads, grandpas, grandmas, fifth cousins once removed. Have a website, https computer science GCSE alevel.wordpress.com. You can get through to me on my email, demo999@yahoo.com. And as Einstein said, "I never teach my pupils, I only attempt to provide the conditions in which they can learn." Thank you very much for your time. Any questions?